He was once the bravest military dog in his entire unit, but after watching his handler die, Max refused to eat, simply waiting in the dark for a man who would never come back. Everyone thought the heartbroken German Shepherd was a completely lost cause until a young orphaned Navy SEAL stepped into his cold cage and absolutely refused to leave. What started as a stubborn battle of wills between two shattered soldiers turned into a miraculous journey of healing that will completely break your heart and then put it back together again. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which country you are watching from, and if you love stories that melt your heart, please subscribe to support our channel. The concrete floor of the kennel was very cold. Max lay in the farthest corner, blending into the deep shadows. Max was a German Shepherd. Once he was the bravest and most energetic dog in the entire military unit. He used to run ahead of the soldiers, sniffing out danger and saving lives. He had thick black and tan fur, but now his coat was dull and his body looked thin. His dark brown eyes stared at the blank gray wall. He did not blink very often. A metal bowl full of dry dog food sat near the heavy steel door. It was completely untouched. Max had not eaten a proper meal for days. He only drank a little water when it was dark and no one was looking. Outside his cage, the other dogs in the base barked loudly. They jumped and played and trained. They were full of life and energy. Max was entirely silent. His silence was heavy and dark. It filled the small space like a thick cloud. He was waiting for a man who would never come back. Sergeant Miller was gone. Miller was his handler, his partner, and his whole world. They had done everything together. Now the world was just a cold metal box. People came and went every day. The base doctors checked on him. Kind soldiers tried to pet his head. Max ignored every single one of them. If someone got too close, he growled. It was a low, angry sound deep in his chest. It meant to stay away. He did not want new friends. He wanted Miller. But Miller was buried under the earth, and Max felt trapped above it. The pain inside the dog was a real, physical thing. It made his bones ache. It made his strong heart beat slowly. He was fading away, day by day, choosing to end his own story. The base command knew they had to do something fast. A war dog was a soldier, and they do not leave soldiers behind. But Max was losing his own private war inside his head. Across the busy base, Leo stood quietly in a small, dusty office. Leo was a young Navy SEAL. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and a calm, very patient face. He wore his NWU Type 3 uniform with digital woodland camo, standing straight with his hands behind his back. Commander Harris sat behind a heavy metal desk. Harris was an older man with thin gray hair and stern, very tired eyes. He rubbed his face with his hands and looked down at a paper file. The file had a bright picture of Max from a year ago. "He is dying, Leo," Harris said. The older man sounded completely defeated. "The vets say there is nothing wrong with his body, no sickness, no injury. It is his mind. He has given up on living." Leo looked at the picture on the desk. He saw a strong dog with bright, happy eyes. "He lost his person, sir," Leo said. His voice was steady and quiet. "Yes, and now he refuses to work. He refuses to eat anything. He is angry and deeply sad," Harris replied, shaking his head. "We cannot force him to be happy, but we cannot just let him starve to death in a cage. I am assigning him to you starting today." Leo nodded his head slowly. He did not ask why. He was a soldier and he followed orders, but deep down he also understood why Harris chose him. Leo was an orphan. He grew up on the streets without a family or a home. He knew exactly what it felt like to be left behind by the world. He knew the hot anger that comes from deep, cold sadness. He knew how it felt to sit in a corner and hate everyone who tried to help. "I will do my best, sir," Leo said simply. "Do not get your hopes up too high," Harris warned him, closing the file. "He might bite you. He is unpredictable right now." Leo just nodded again. He turned around and left the quiet office. The sun was very hot outside. The military base was loud and busy. Green trucks drove by. Groups of soldiers marched in straight lines. Leo walked slowly toward the K9 unit at the edge of the camp. His boots crunched on the dry gravel. He did not feel afraid of a dangerous dog. He felt a strange pull in his chest. He was going to meet a broken soul. He knew how to fix broken things. You just need a lot of time and a lot of truth. The smell of wet concrete and old dog food filled the air. Leo walked down the long row of wire cages. Dogs barked at him as he passed. Some wagged their tails fast. Some jumped their front paws against the chain-link fences, asking for play. Leo ignored them all. He kept his eyes forward and kept walking until he reached the very last cage at the end of the building. It was much quieter here. The small red sign on the door just said, Max. Leo stopped his feet and looked inside. The shadows in the back of the cage were deep. At first, he only saw a dark shape curled up in the corner. Then, he saw the eyes. Max was watching him. The dog did not move a muscle. He did not make a single sound. Leo stood there for a long time. He did not speak a word. He just stood still and watched the dog back. Max's fur was messy and dirty. His ribs showed a little bit through his sides. Leo felt a sudden tight pain in his chest. He remembered a cold, rainy night many years ago. He was a very small boy hiding under a concrete bridge in a big city. He was starving and terrified. A tall stranger had found him there. The stranger did not yell at him. He did not grab his arm. He just sat down on the wet ground and waited. Leo decided to do the exact same thing today. He reached out and slowly opened the heavy metal door. It made a loud, sharp squeak. Max's ears twitched flat against his head. A low, dark rumble started in the dog's throat. It was a very clear warning to back off. Leo stepped inside the cage anyway. He moved very slowly. He did not look directly into Max's eyes because in the dog world, a direct stare is a threat. Leo wanted to show absolute peace. He closed the door behind him with a soft click. The space was small. He could smell the dry dust on Max's fur. Leo walked over to the food bowl. The dry food looked old and stale. He picked up the metal bowl. Max watched his hand carefully. The growl grew much louder. It filled the small, tight room. Max curled his black lips and showed his teeth. They were white and very sharp. Any normal person would run away fast. Leo did not run. He was a seal. He had faced guns and fire. He could face a grieving, angry dog. He threw the old food into a small trash bin outside the wire cage. Then he reached into his deep pocket. He brought out a small plastic bag of fresh meat. It was plain cooked beef. He had saved it from the kitchen just for this. He dropped a few large pieces into the clean bowl. The rich smell of meat filled the air immediately. Max stopped growling for 1 single second. His black, wet nose twitched. The basic instinct to eat fought a hard battle with his deep sadness. But the sadness won the fight. Max lowered his big head back down to his paws. He turned his face away from the bowl and away from Leo. He looked at the blank gray wall again. The message was obvious. Leave me alone. Let me die here. Leo did not leave. He placed the metal bowl on the floor. It made a soft sound. He did not push the bowl toward Max's nose. He did not say the word eat. He did not say good boy. Words were completely useless right now. Max had heard enough empty human words. Leo slowly sat down on the very cold concrete floor. He crossed his strong legs. He leaned his wide back against the chain-link fence. He was sitting on the exact opposite side of the cage. There was safe space between them. Leo rested his rough hands on his knees. He looked straight ahead at the wall, not at the dog. He took a deep breath of the dusty air and let it out very slowly. He relaxed his shoulders. He made his whole body look soft and calm. Time passed slowly. The base outside was noisy with machines, but inside the cage it was perfectly still. 10 minutes went by, then 20 minutes. Leo's legs began to hurt from the hard floor, but he did not shift his weight at all. He became like a rock. He wanted to be a safe, quiet thing in Max's broken world. Max slowly opened one eye. He looked at the human sitting near him. He fully expected the human to shout or point fingers. Humans always wanted something from him, but this strange human did nothing. This human just sat there like a tree. Max let out a long, heavy sigh. It was a sound of pure exhaustion. Leo heard the sigh. He turned his head just a tiny fraction. He caught a quick glimpse of Max's dark brown eyes. In that brief second, Leo saw it clearly. He saw the shattered pieces of a broken heart. He saw the exact same hopeless look he used to have when he was a boy with absolutely no home. The pain in the dog's eyes was a clear mirror reflecting Leo's own painful past. Leo did not smile at the dog. He did not reach his hand out to pet him. He just stayed exactly where he was. He made a silent, strong promise to the animal. I will not leave you. I will not push you. You can be sad today. We can sit here and be sad together. The afternoon sun began to sink outside. Long, dark shadows stretched across the concrete floor. The bowl of fresh meat sat untouched between the man and the dog. Max closed his eyes again. Leo kept his silent watch. It was only day one. The long battle had just begun. The enemy was despair, and Leo had all the time in the world. A full week passed. Every morning Leo walked down the long row of wire cages. He went straight to the last cage. Max never wagged his tail to greet him. The big dog just watched him with cold, dark eyes. Leo spent hours sitting on the hard concrete floor. He did not ask Max to do anything. He just sat there. Sometimes Sarah came by to check on the dogs. Sarah was a young veterinarian assistant. She had bright red hair tied in a messy ponytail and a round, kind face. She always carried a clipboard. He is losing more weight, Leo, Sarah said quietly one morning. She stood outside the cage and looked at Max. He drinks water, but he barely touches the food. You need to be careful. A hungry dog is a dangerous dog. Leo nodded. I know. He is testing me, Leo replied simply. He opened the heavy metal door and stepped inside. To make himself more comfortable on the hard floor, Leo often unlaced his heavy boots. He slipped them off and sat cross-legged in his usual corner. He closed his eyes to rest for a moment. The bass was loud outside, but the cage was quiet. When Leo opened his eyes 10 minutes later, his left boot was gone. He looked around the small space. Max was lying on his bed in the opposite corner. The dog looked perfectly innocent. He rested his large head on his paws and stared at the gray wall. Leo stood up and walked over to the dog bed. He saw the black toe of his boot sticking out from under Max's blanket. Max had quietly dragged it away while Leo had his eyes closed. Max growled a very low warning when Leo came near. The dog was guarding the stolen boot. Leo did not yell. He did not snatch the boot back. He just smiled a little bit. Keep it warm for me, Leo said. He walked back to his corner wearing only one boot and a sock. He sat down again. Max looked confused. The human did not fight back. The next day, Max tried a new trick. He was getting annoyed that Leo would not leave. Leo brought a large metal bowl full of fresh, clean water into the cage. He knelt down to place it near Max's bed. Suddenly, Max stood up. He used his thick front paw to hit the edge of the bowl. He did it on purpose. The heavy bowl flipped over. Cold water splashed everywhere. It completely soaked Leo's pants and his socks. The cold water dripped down Leo's legs. Max stepped back quickly. He lowered his head and showed his teeth. He was ready for a fight. He expected the human to shout and raise a hand. For one short second, Leo felt a sharp flash of anger. The water was very cold, and his legs were completely wet. He stood up tall. He looked down at the dog. But then a sudden memory hit Leo's mind. He remembered being 10 years old. He was living in a crowded, dirty foster home. He was always angry at the world because he had no parents. One day, he purposely threw a glass plate on the floor. It smashed into 100 pieces. He wanted someone to yell at him. He wanted to fight. The tall stranger who took care of him walked into the kitchen. The man looked at the broken glass. He looked at young Leo's angry, scared face. The man did not shout. He did not hit Leo. He simply handed Leo a broom and helped him sweep the floor. The stranger understood that the anger was just a mask for deep pain. Leo looked at Max. The dog was doing the exact same thing. He was pushing Leo away to see if Leo would really stay. Leo felt his anger melt away. He started to laugh. It was a genuine, warm laugh. "Nice try, buddy," Leo said softly. He grabbed a towel from the shelf outside and wiped the floor. "You missed my shirt." Max slowly closed his mouth. The growl stopped. He watched Leo clean up the mess. The dog seemed to realize that his old tricks were not working on this new human. On the third day of the second week, Leo went to the K9 supply room. He wanted to find something familiar for Max. He searched through 3 dusty plastic bins. Finally, he found a small green box with the name Miller written on it in faded black marker. Inside the box was a rubber Kong toy. It was dark red and very heavily chewed. It was covered in old bite marks. It was Miller's training toy for Max. Leo took the toy and walked back to the cage. When he opened the heavy door, Max did not look up. Leo sat in his usual spot. He held the red rubber toy in his open hand. He did not say a word. The smell of the toy hit Max's nose. The dog's head snapped up immediately. His dark eyes locked onto the red rubber shape. He knew that smell. It was the smell of play, of work, and of his lost best friend. Max stood up. He did not walk. He lunged. He moved incredibly fast. He snatched the toy from Leo's hand with his strong jaws. Max ran back to his corner. He dropped the toy and began to bite it. He did not play with it. He attacked it. He bit down with terrifying force. He chewed and tore at the thick rubber. He was making crying, whining sounds in his throat. It was not a game. It was pure frustration and grief pouring out of him. He was destroying the only thing he had left of Miller. He bit so hard that his gums started to bleed a little. A sharp piece of red rubber ripped off. Leo saw the danger immediately. If Max swallowed the sharp rubber pieces, it would tear his stomach. The dog could die. Leo reacted like a soldier. He moved fast. He leaned forward and reached his strong hand toward Max's mouth. "Max, drop it!" Leo commanded in a loud, firm voice. It was the first time he had given the dog an order. Max froze instantly. The loud voice shocked him. The dog dropped the broken toy between his front paws. He looked at Leo's reaching hand. Suddenly, Max started to shake. His whole large body trembled violently. He pressed himself flat against the cold concrete wall. He bared his teeth, but his eyes were wide with pure terror. He was terrified of losing the toy, and he was terrified of the human taking it away by force. He looked like a cornered wild animal, ready to fight for his life. Leo saw the violent trembling. He saw the sheer panic in the dog's eyes. Leo stopped his hand mid-air. He froze completely. He realized his mistake. He had moved too fast. He had used a commanding voice. He had acted like a handler demanding obedience instead of a friend offering safety. Leo took a very slow, deep breath. He slowly pulled his hand back. He did not try to take the red toy. He did not repeat the order. Instead, he pushed himself backward across the floor. He moved far away from Max and the toy. He sat back against the chain-link fence. Then Leo raised both of his hands up to his chest, showing his empty palms. It was a universal sign of surrender. "I am sorry," Leo said. His voice was very soft and quiet now. "Keep it. It is yours. I will not take it." He kept his hands open and visible. He lowered his eyes, looking at the floor instead of the dog. He gave Max all the space in the small cage. He showed the dog that he was not a threat. He proved that he would never use force or violence. Max watched Leo's open hands for a very long minute. The violent trembling slowly stopped. The dog looked at the broken red toy, then back at Leo. Carefully, Max picked up the toy again. But this time, he did not tear it. He just held it gently in his mouth and rested his heavy head on his paws. He let out a long breath. The cage was silent again, but the air felt different. A tiny invisible bridge of trust had just been built between the broken dog and the quiet soldier. Leo decided to stop trying. He stopped pushing the metal bowl toward the dog. He stopped offering dog treats. He needed a completely different plan. The next day at noon, he walked to the base mess hall. He met Corporal Jenkins at the food counter. Jenkins was a large, cheerful man with a thick black mustache and a bright white apron. He always gave the soldiers extra food and a warm smile. 2 portions of beef stew and some dried jerky today, Leo? Jenkins asked with a loud, friendly voice. Leo just smiled and nodded his head. He took the metal tray and walked back to the K9 unit. He did not go inside Max's small room today. Instead, he sat down on the dirt ground just outside the chain-link fence of Max's outdoor run. It was a sunny, quiet afternoon. Leo crossed his legs and put the food tray on his lap. He started to eat his lunch. He ate slowly. He made sure to chew loudly. The rich, warm smell of the hot beef stew floated through the wire fence. Max was lying inside the dark, cool part of his cage. The dog's ears twitched. His black nose lifted into the air. He smelled the fresh food. Leo did not look at the dog. He just looked up at the clear blue sky. "Good soup," Leo said out loud. His voice was calm and even. He did not ask Max to come. He did not offer Max a bite. He just sat there, sharing the same air and the same quiet afternoon. This became their new routine. Every single day at 12 o'clock, Leo brought his lunch to the dirt patch outside the fence. He ate his food. He spoke to the wind. Max stayed inside his dark corner, but he always watched. The days grew longer and hotter. The dirt outside the cage was dry and dusty. The base was loud in the distance, but the corner of the K9 unit was very peaceful. It felt like a small, secret island. Leo finished his sandwich one Tuesday. He held a piece of dried beef jerky in his hand. He looked at the dry dirt. "I hated the world when I was young," Leo said suddenly. His voice was very soft. He was talking to the dog, but he was also talking to himself. "I was angry, just like you. I thought everyone was bad and cruel." Max shifted his weight on his bed inside. He rested his chin on his paws, keeping his dark eyes fixed on the man. "Then a man found me," Leo continued. He used simple, short words. The memory was very clear in his mind. He was a tall man. He had quiet eyes. He did not pity me. He did not force me to be good. He just stayed near me. He bought me hot food. He sat with me in the cold. The wind blew gently through the wire fence. It carried the smell of pine trees and dust. The moment was very simple and strangely beautiful. 2 broken soldiers, 1 human and 1 dog, sitting together in the silence. Leo tore a small piece of the beef jerky. He tossed it gently through the fence. It landed on the concrete floor a few feet away from Max. Max looked at the meat. He did not move to eat it, but he did not growl either. He just listened to the steady, calm rhythm of Leo's voice. "He saved my life by just being there," Leo said. "I am going to be there for you, Max. Take your time." By the end of the 3rd week, the weather suddenly changed. The blue sky turned a deep, bruised purple. Dark, heavy clouds rolled over the military base. The air became very cold and thick with humidity. A loud crash of thunder shook the ground. The other dogs in the kennels began to whine and bark nervously. Soldiers ran across the yard to find shelter. Leo did not run. He was sitting in his usual spot on the dirt, right outside Max's outdoor fence. He had a piece of dried meat in his hand. The first drops of rain fell. They were huge and freezing cold. They hit the dirt and made dark mud spots. Then the sky opened up completely. A massive wall of water crashed down. The rain was deafening. It hit the metal roofs of the kennels with a loud roar. Max was safe and dry inside the covered part of his run. He stood up and looked out. He expected the human to run away. All humans ran away from the rain, but Leo stayed exactly where he was. The freezing water soaked through his shirt and pants in seconds. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead. Water dripped heavily down his nose and chin. He sat perfectly still, with his back straight. He kept his hand resting on his knee, holding the piece of dried beef jerky. He looked through the silver wire fence, straight into the dark shadows where Max stood. Leo's eyes were calm and completely fearless. The storm raged all around them, but Leo was an unbreakable anchor. The rain poured down harder. Small rivers of muddy water formed around Leo's boots. He was shivering slightly from the sudden cold, but he did not break eye contact with the dark shape inside the cage. Max watched the man for a very long time. The dog's mind was racing. This human was different. This human did not leave when things got hard. This human stayed in the cold and the wet, just to be near him. The thick wall of grief and anger inside Max finally began to crack. Slowly, very slowly, Max stepped out of the dry shadows. He walked into the outdoor section of the run. The heavy rain immediately hit his thick black and tan fur. Max did not care. He kept his eyes locked on Leo's hand. He walked right up to the chain-link fence. Only the thin metal wire separated them now. Max lowered his big head. He sniffed the wet air. He smelled the rain, the mud, and the dried meat. Leo did not move a single muscle. He barely breathed. He just turned his palm up, offering the jerky through a small gap in the wire. Max pushed his wet black nose against the fence. His mouth opened. Very gently, with extreme care, the large dog took the piece of meat from Leo's open fingers. He did not bite the skin. He did not snatch it. He just took it and chewed it slowly. The taste of the food was a small spark of life in the darkness. Leo felt the warm breath of the dog against his freezing, wet hand. He smiled a very small, quiet smile. "Good boy," Leo whispered into the roaring rain. It was their very first victory. It was a bright, cool morning. 2 weeks after the storm, the heavy metal door of the cage finally stayed open. Leo walked out, and Max followed him. The dog wore a thick nylon collar, but Leo held the leash very loosely. They walked together toward the main training yard. The yard was a wide field of green grass with tall wooden walls, tunnels, and climbing ramps. Master Chief Reynolds stood in the center of the field. Reynolds was a very large, bald man with a thick white scar on his left cheek. He held a silver stopwatch in his massive hand. He was the head trainer for all K9 units. "Let us see what he remembers, Leo," Reynolds said. His voice was loud but kind. Leo unclipped the leash. He pointed his finger at the tall wooden wall. "Go," Leo said softly. Max did not hesitate. The dog's ears went up. His body lowered to the ground. Then he ran. He moved like a dark bullet across the green grass. He leaped over the 6-foot wall with pure grace. He ran through the dark plastic tunnel without making a sound. He balanced perfectly on the narrow wooden beam. Reynolds clicked his stopwatch. The old trainer smiled. "He is still a ghost, Leo. He is fast and incredibly smart," Reynolds noted. Leo watched the dog. Max was panting, but his eyes looked clear. For 10 beautiful minutes, Max was a proud working dog again. He followed Leo's simple hand signals perfectly. He did not need loud shouts. They moved together like a quiet, well-rehearsed dance. It was a moment of perfect peace. But Leo knew the real test was still coming. Leo called Max back to his side. He patted the dog's firm shoulder once. While Reynolds walked to a metal shed to get the next training tools, Leo remembered the manila folder sitting on his desk. The night before, Leo had finally read the official military file of Sergeant Miller. He needed to understand the exact shape of Max's ghost. The file was thin and full of black ink. It stated that Miller and Max were on a routine patrol in a dusty, ruined city. Max was trained to find hidden explosives. The report detailed the final moments clearly. Miller had ordered Max to stay back. Miller walked forward alone to inspect a suspicious object abandoned in an alley. The object was a standard green canvas military backpack. It looked completely normal, but it was a trap. The explosion was massive and instant. Miller died right there on the dusty street. Max survived because Miller had made him stay far away. Reading those cold-typed words made Leo's chest ache. He realized Max did not just lose his best friend. Max had watched his friend walk toward a bomb and could not stop it. The dog carried a heavy, crushing guilt. He was a protector who failed to protect. Leo looked down at Max now. The dog was sitting calmly on the grass, watching Reynolds return. Leo felt a tight knot form in his stomach. He knew what the next exercise was, and he knew it was going to be a terrible mistake. Reynolds walked back onto the green grass. He carried 3 wooden boxes and dropped them in a straight line. Then he pulled something else from his shoulder. It was a heavy, green canvas military backpack. He threw the backpack on the ground near the boxes. It hit the dirt with a dull, heavy thud. "Scent detection," Reynolds announced. "Let us see if his nose still works." He backed away and crossed his arms. Leo looked at Max. The change was instant and terrifying. Max froze completely. His ears pinned flat against his head. His dark eyes locked onto the green backpack. His chest began to heave rapidly. He was breathing too fast. The confident, brilliant working dog disappeared in a single second. Max started to step backward. His paws slipped on the wet morning grass. A low, vibrating whine came from deep inside his throat. It was not an angry growl. It was a sound of pure panic. The green backpack on the grass was not just a bag. To Max, it was the bomb. It was the monster that took Miller away. It was death itself. "Max, look at me," Leo said. He kept his voice low and steady. He stepped in front of the dog to block his view of the bag, but Max could not hear him. The dog was completely lost in a nightmare. The memory was too loud. Max turned his head wildly from side to side. He was looking for an escape. He was looking for Miller. The panic completely took over his mind. Suddenly, Max snapped. He turned around and bolted. He ran incredibly fast, completely ignoring Leo's voice. He ran off the green grass and onto the hard gravel path. He ran toward a large green transport truck parked near the supply building. Max dove straight under the heavy metal body of the truck. He squeezed himself behind the large muddy back tire, and then he began to howl. It was a high, broken, agonizing sound. It echoed across the entire training yard. It sounded like a creature being torn apart. Reynolds looked shocked. "I will get a catch pole," the trainer said quickly. "No," Leo answered firmly. "Do not bring a pole. You will only make it worse." Leo dropped the leash on the grass. He ran across the yard to the parked truck. He dropped to his knees on the sharp gravel. He did not care about his clean uniform. He flattened his stomach on the dirt and slowly crawled under the massive vehicle. It smelled like thick oil, wet mud, and hot rubber. The space was dark and tight. Max was pressed against the inner tire, shaking violently. His eyes were wide and blind with terror. The howling continued, loud and desperate. Leo crawled closer, inch by inch, until his face was right next to the dog's head. He reached out and wrapped both of his strong arms around Max's shaking, thick neck. He pulled the large dog firmly against his chest. He held him tight, like a father holding a frightened child in the dark. Max struggled for a second, but Leo did not let go. He pressed his face into Max's messy fur. "I am here," Leo whispered, right into the dog's ear. His voice was a steady rock in the middle of a storm. "I am right here. I will not leave. You are safe." He repeated the simple words over and over. Slowly, the terrible howling stopped. The violent shaking turned into small, exhausted shivers. Under the cold metal of the truck, the broken soldier and the broken dog held on to each other, letting the ghost of the past wash over them. After the dark day under the truck, something shifted completely. Max no longer sat in the dark corner of his cage. He started following Leo everywhere. When Leo walked across the dusty yard, Max walked right beside his left leg. Their steps matched perfectly. The big dog became his silent shadow. One morning, they were standing near the main supply building, waiting for water. Private First Class Thomas walked quickly toward them. Thomas was a very young, skinny soldier with round glasses and a constant nervous smile. He carried a heavy cardboard box full of base mail. Thomas was looking down at a paper and walked too fast. He tripped on a large white rock and stumbled forward, falling straight toward Leo. Instantly, Max moved. He stepped directly in front of Leo, creating a solid wall between his human and the stranger. He planted his large paws firmly on the dirt. He did not try to bite, but he let out a deep, booming warning bark. His thick tail was completely stiff, and his ears were pointing straight forward like radar dishes. A month ago, Leo would have panicked and pulled the leash hard. Today, Leo understood the dog's silent words perfectly. Max was saying, "I will protect my human from any danger." Leo simply placed his bare hand gently on the back of Max's warm neck. "Easy, buddy. He is safe," Leo said in a calm, steady voice. Max immediately stopped barking and sat down, though he kept his sharp, dark eyes fixed firmly on the nervous soldier. Thomas backed away slowly, nodding his head rapidly. "Sorry, Leo. He looks very serious," Thomas said, holding his mailbox tight against his chest. Leo smiled a little bit. It was a good kind of serious. Max had found a new purpose in his life. He had a new brother to protect, and he was taking his job very seriously. Healing is never a straight, easy line. There were still many hard days. Sometimes Max would wake up in the middle of the night from a terrible bad dream. He would pace the floor of his cage and whine in the dark. But Leo was changing too. The young seal learned how to read a completely different language. He learned that a low tail meant worry and doubt. He learned that soft, relaxed eyes meant true trust. He learned to listen to the quiet spaces between actions instead of just listening to loud commands. Working with the broken dog forced Leo to look at his own broken pieces. For his entire life, Leo had carried a deep, angry pain from being a lost orphan. He always pushed people away before they could have a chance to leave him. He thought being tough meant being completely alone. But Max did not leave. The dog just stayed by his side, demanding nothing but time. Watching Max slowly learn to trust again made Leo realize something very important. He needed to be patient with himself. He could not rush his own healing process. He had to forgive the angry, scared little boy living inside his memory. When he sat with Max in the quiet evenings, watching the orange sun go down over the noisy military base, Leo felt a strange, deep peace. His heart was not a tight, hard fist anymore. The heavy walls he built around himself were falling down. He was learning how to love without fear. However, there was one strange problem left to solve. At the far edge of the K9 training yard, there was an old, rusted chain-link fence. An ancient dead oak tree stood near the metal wire, casting long shadows. For the past week, Max had developed a fierce, unbreakable obsession with this specific spot. Every time they walked past the dead tree, Max pulled incredibly hard on his leather leash. He would rush to a small patch of bare dirt right next to the thick, twisted roots. Then he would dig. He dug frantically, throwing dirt and small rocks everywhere with his strong front paws. If another handler or another working dog walked too close to the tree, Max would turn around and bark aggressively. It was not a simple warning bark. It was a frantic, desperate sound. He completely refused to let anyone near the hole. He protected that small patch of dirt like it was the most valuable thing in the entire world. "Leave it, Max," Leo commanded gently one afternoon, testing the dog. Max ignored the order completely. He just kept digging until his nails were dull and his paws were covered in thick, dark mud. Leo stood back and just watched him for a long time. He narrowed his eyes and thought hard. Max was not hunting a rat underground. He was not burying an old soup bone. The dog's body language was incredibly tense and deeply focused. It looked like a very serious personal mission. Leo realized that Max was looking for something very specific, something that was buried a long time ago, before the bomb, before the sadness took over. The next morning, Leo came back to the yard very early. The air was cool, wet, and foggy. He brought a small folding metal shovel from his green gear bag. Max was already standing by the dead oak tree, firmly guarding his special spot. When Leo walked up with the metal shovel, Max stepped directly over the hole. He whined loudly and blocked the dirt with his entire body. He looked up at Leo with wide, very anxious eyes. "I know it is important to you," Leo said in a very soft, respectful voice. "Let me help. We will do this together." Leo slowly knelt down on the wet, cold grass. He did not push the heavy dog away. He just started to gently scrape the dirt right next to Max's muddy paws. Seeing Leo help, Max relaxed slightly and stepped back just a few inches. The dog watched the metal shovel with intense focus. Leo dug down about 1 foot into the soft, dark earth. Suddenly, the sharp edge of the shovel hit something hard. It made a sharp clink sound against metal. Max whined again and quickly scratched the dirt with his wet nose. Leo reached his bare hand into the cold mud. His fingers touched smooth metal. He pulled the object out into the morning light. It was a small, flat tin box. It was heavily covered in dark brown rust and old, dry dirt. Leo wiped the thick mud off with his thumb. The box was sealed completely shut with thick black military tape. Max sat down immediately. He stared at the rusty box, perfectly quiet and still. His long mission was finally over. Leo sat flat on the wet grass. His strong hands were shaking slightly. He peeled the old black tape away. It broke into dry, brittle pieces. He carefully opened the tight metal lid. Inside, resting on a neatly folded piece of white paper, was a silver metal chain. Attached to the silver chain was a standard military dog tag. The name deeply engraved on the cold metal read, "Sergeant Miller, David." Leo felt a massive, heavy weight hit his chest. Under the dog tag was a single letter. The paper was dry but wrinkled at the edges. It had never been mailed. Leo stared at the shiny dog tag, finally realizing the truth. This lonely dirt patch under the dead tree was Max's secret shrine for his lost best friend. Leo sat on the cold, wet grass under the dead oak tree. The rusty tin box rested heavily on his lap. Max sat right beside him, his thick black and tan shoulder pressing firmly against Leo's arm. The dog was completely silent, watching the box with deep, knowing eyes. Far away across the training yard, Chaplain Davis walked slowly along the gravel path. Davis was a short, gentle man with thinning silver hair and a quiet, peaceful smile. He wore a dark uniform with a small silver cross on his collar. He saw the soldier and the dog sitting in the dirt. He paused for a moment, understanding that it was a private, sacred space, and then quietly walked away without saying a word. Leo did not notice the chaplain. His entire world was the folded white paper in his hands. The paper was old, slightly yellow at the edges, and felt very fragile. His strong, rough fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, written in black ink that had not faded inside the tight metal box. Leo took a deep breath of the morning air. He prepared himself to read the final words of a brave man. He looked at Max once, then looked down at the paper. The date at the top was only 2 days before the explosion that took Miller's life. The letter began simply, "To whoever finds this, I am writing this because a soldier always knows when his luck is running out." Leo read the words slowly. His mind heard the voice of a man he had never formally met. Miller wrote about his deep love for Max. He described the dog not as an animal, but as a true brother. Then the black ink spelled out a very clear, completely unexpected order. "If I do not make it back, do not give Max to another standard handler. Do not retire him to a normal civilian home. He will not survive the grief. I have one final request. Find a young Navy SEAL named Leo. Give my dog to him." Leo stopped reading. His heart slammed hard against his ribs. He read the sentence again. He touched the letters with his thumb. It was his name. But how was this possible? Leo was in a completely different military unit. He had never worked with Miller. He had never spoken to the man in his entire life. A cold wave of shock washed over his body. Max whined softly, feeling the sudden tension in the human beside him. The dog pushed his wet nose against Leo's hand, urging him to keep going. Leo blinked his eyes. The morning fog felt very thick. He forced his eyes to move to the next paragraph, seeking an answer to the impossible mystery written on the old page. The next lines hit Leo like a physical blow. Leo, if you are reading this, it means they listened to my request. You probably do not remember my face. It has been many years, but I remember a very angry, very scared 10-year-old boy under a cold, wet bridge in the city. I remember the broken glass plate on the kitchen floor. I remember handing you a broom. Leo stopped breathing. The paper shook violently in his hands. The tall stranger, the quiet man who had saved him from the streets, who gave him hot food and a safe place when the world was cruel. That man was Sergeant David Miller. The letter continued. I had to leave to deploy overseas. I could not adopt you officially, but I never stopped watching you. I kept track of your files. I watched you grow from a broken kid into a strong, brave SEAL. I am incredibly proud of you, Leo. You learned how to survive the darkest parts of life. Max is just like you used to be. If I die, he will fall into that exact same dark place. He will be angry. He will push everyone away. He needs someone who knows how to sit in the dark and wait. He needs you. The unseen thread that connected their lives was suddenly visible, shining brightly in the gray morning light. Miller had never abandoned him. The truth completely shattered the last heavy wall around Leo's heart. He was a tough Navy SEAL. He had survived war and physical pain, but reading those final words broke him completely open. Take care of each other, the letter ended. Love, David. Tears welled up in Leo's eyes. They spilled over his eyelashes and fell down his cheeks, dropping onto the yellow paper. He did not try to stop them. He let out a loud, broken sob. The sound echoed in the quiet yard. Max did not run away from the loud noise. Instead, the large German shepherd moved closer. Max climbed halfway into Leo's lap. He licked the salty tears off Leo's face with his warm, rough tongue. He whined, a gentle sound of deep comfort. Leo dropped the letter onto the grass. He threw both of his strong arms around the dog's thick neck. He buried his wet face in Max's dark fur, crying freely like the little boy he used to be. He finally understood everything. Max was not just a military assignment. Max was a gift. He was the living legacy of the father Leo never officially had. They were two broken pieces left behind by the same great man, brought together to make each other whole. Leo held the dog incredibly tight. I have got you, Leo whispered into the fur, his voice thick with emotion. We are family now. The sun finally broke through the heavy morning fog, shining warmly on the man and his dog. 3 months after finding the letter, the base sirens howled loudly in the middle of the night. A massive hurricane had just battered the coast. Leo woke up instantly. Max was already standing by the metal door, wide awake and completely ready. They ran together to the main command center. The large room was chaotic and loud with ringing phones. Captain Hayes stood by a wide paper map on a wooden table. Hayes was a short, thick man with a bright yellow rain jacket and a deeply lined, very worried face. He was the local search and rescue coordinator. A family of 3 is missing in the Blackwood Ridge area, Hayes said loudly over the terrible noise of the wind outside. The river is flooding fast. Helicopters cannot fly in this violent wind. We need ground units right now. Leo nodded his head. He looked down at Max. The large dog wore a bright orange tactical vest. His dark brown eyes were calm and sharply focused. They quickly climbed into the back of a heavy green transport truck with a small team of medics. The ride was rough and bumpy. The storm raged outside the thin canvas roof. Rain pounded against the metal like heavy bullets. Leo held onto a thick nylon strap with one hand and kept his other hand firmly on Max's warm shoulder. He felt the steady, strong beat of the dog's heart. They were no longer two broken souls. They were a single, unbreakable team. The truck stopped at the dark edge of the forest. The dirt road was completely washed away. From here, they had to walk. The forest was a living nightmare of cold water and fierce wind. It was completely dark. The rain fell in thick, heavy sheets, cutting their visibility to almost zero. The wind screamed through the broken pine trees, making a loud, terrifying sound. Leo turned on his bright shoulder flashlight. The beam of white light cut through the heavy rain. The mud on the ground was deep and incredibly slippery. Every single step was a hard fight against the angry storm. Max walked right in front of Leo. The dog kept his nose very low to the wet ground. The heavy rain washed away most scents, but Max was relentless. He completely ignored the freezing water dripping directly into his eyes. He ignored the loud, sharp cracks of breaking branches all around them. Leo trusted the dog's nose with his life. After an hour of brutal hiking up a steep, muddy hill, Max suddenly stopped. He dug his front paws deep into the brown mud and barked twice. Leo hurried forward. Half buried in the thick sludge was a small pink child's shoe. Leo picked it up quickly and radioed Captain Hayes. "We have a solid trail," Leo shouted into his plastic radio mic. "We are moving north toward the upper Rocky Ravine." The weather grew even worse. The temperature dropped sharply. The roaring sound of the flooded river grew much louder in the dark. Leo and Max pushed forward into the black trees, following the invisible thread of scent. They reached the dangerous edge of a deep, rocky ravine. The water below was violent and brown, rising incredibly fast. Suddenly, the wet ground beneath Leo's heavy boots shifted. It was a massive, sudden mudslide. The earth simply melted away under his feet. At the exact same moment, a loud, explosive crack echoed above them in the dark sky. A giant dead pine tree snapped in the fierce wind. It fell straight down toward them. Leo saw the huge black shadow falling. "Max, move!" Leo screamed. He shoved the large German shepherd hard to the right side. Max tumbled safely into the wet green bushes. But Leo was not fast enough. The massive tree trunk crashed down onto the slippery rocks. Thick, heavy wooden branches slammed violently into Leo's body. He fell backward into the rising muddy water. A sharp, blinding pain shot up his right leg. A thick branch had pinned his leg tightly against a large, solid boulder. He was completely trapped. The cold river water immediately rushed over his chest. He gasped for air. He reached quickly for his shoulder radio, but the plastic device was shattered into useless pieces against the rocks. The flashing green light on it was dead. Leo tried to push the heavy wet branch with both of his strong hands, but it did not move a single inch. The water was rising by the minute. It was already up to his cold neck. If he did not get out, he would drown in the freezing dark. Max scrambled desperately down the muddy bank. The dog stood in the shallow rushing water, staring at Leo in pure horror. The loud noise, the terrible chaos, the violent destruction all around them. It was exactly like the dusty alley. It was the deadly bomb all over again. Max started to panic. He paced back and forth in the freezing water, whining loudly, his ears pinned flat against his wet head. He bit frantically at the heavy wooden branches, trying to pull them off Leo, but they were too massive. "Max, stop!" Leo yelled over the roaring wind. He coughed hard as muddy water splashed into his mouth. He looked right into the dog's terrified eyes. He knew exactly what Max was seeing. The terrible ghost of Miller was there in the dark water. Max was absolutely terrified of losing his human again. "I cannot get out, buddy," Leo said. His voice was tight with sharp pain, but completely steady. He raised his shaking hand and pointed up the dark, muddy hill. "Find them! Go get help! Go!" Max froze completely. The dog's entire body trembled violently in the cold. He let out a low, desperate growl. He absolutely refused to leave his master behind. He remembered that the last time he walked away, his best friend died. Leo slapped the water hard with his flat hand. "That is an order! Go, Max! Save us!" Leo commanded with all his remaining strength. The dog stared deeply at Leo. He saw the fierce, absolute trust in the man's eyes. This was not a sad goodbye. This was a critical mission. Max's fearful growl turned into a loud, incredibly powerful bark that echoed above the storm. He turned around instantly, his strong claws dug deep into the muddy bank. The brave dog leaped out of the rushing water and sprinted desperately into the pitch-black forest, running faster than the wind to save his family. The dark forest was a solid wall of freezing rain and violent wind. Max ran faster than he ever had in his entire life. His paws slipped on the deep, wet mud, but he never stopped moving forward. His lungs burned, and his thick fur was incredibly heavy with cold water. He had to find help for his human. He burst out of the dark tree line and onto the main dirt road. A pair of bright white headlights cut through the fierce storm. It was a heavy medical rescue truck creeping along the washed-out path. Max ran directly into the middle of the road and barked loudly, standing right in the bright beam of light. The truck slammed on its brakes, sliding slightly in the mud before coming to a full stop. E.M.T. Ramirez jumped out of the heavy vehicle. Ramirez was a tall, strong woman with very calm, dark eyes and a bright yellow reflective vest. She carried a large red medical bag. "It is the K-9 from the missing SEAL unit," she shouted over the roaring wind. Max did not wait for them. He turned around and ran right back into the dark trees, stopping every few seconds to make sure she was following him. Ramirez and two other medics grabbed heavy ropes and strong flashlights. They chased the brave dog into the deadly storm. Down in the rocky ravine, the freezing water was almost covering Leo's mouth. His body was completely numb from the cold. He closed his eyes, feeling incredibly tired. Suddenly, a bright white light hit his wet face. He heard a familiar, powerful bark. It was Max. The dog stood on the muddy bank, looking down at him. E.M.T. Ramirez slid down the dangerous hill quickly. "We have you, soldier," Ramirez said in a firm, steady voice. She and her team attached thick ropes to the massive pine tree branch. With a loud shout, they pulled together and lifted the heavy wood just enough. Ramirez grabbed Leo's tactical vest and dragged him completely out of the freezing water. Leo looked up at Max and smiled weakly before the dark world faded to black. Warmth was the very first thing Leo felt. He slowly opened his heavy eyes. The blinding storm and the terrible cold were completely gone. He was lying in a clean white bed inside the base medical station. The quiet room smelled like strong soap and clean cotton. Dr. Vance stood near the end of the bed. Vance was a quiet, older man with a neat gray beard and very gentle hands. He was writing notes on a blue clipboard. "Welcome back, Leo," Dr. Vance said with a soft, warm smile. "You swallowed a lot of dirty river water, and your right leg is badly bruised by that tree, but nothing is broken. You are a very lucky man." Leo tried to sit up, but his entire body felt heavy and sore. Then he felt a warm, heavy weight resting solidly against his left side. He looked down. Max was lying right next to him on the white hospital bed. The large German shepherd had his heavy head resting carefully on Leo's chest. Max's dark fur was completely dry and clean now. When Leo moved his hand, Max opened one brown eye and thumped his thick tail twice against the soft mattress. "He absolutely refused to leave the room," Dr. Vance explained quietly. "When we brought you in, he planted his paws by the door and growled at anyone who tried to pull him away. So, we let him stay here." Leo smiled and slowly ran his rough fingers through Max's soft fur. "Good boy," Leo whispered. The deep, heavy peace after the violent storm filled the quiet room. Outside the clean window, the sky was a clear, bright blue. The wind was completely gone. Later that afternoon, Captain Hayes stopped by the open door. He gave Leo a quick, proud salute. He told Leo that the missing family of 3 had been found completely safe on the high ridge, thanks to the path Leo and Max had cleared. The mission was a total success. The next 2 weeks were slow and peaceful. Leo stayed in the medical ward to heal his injured leg and clear the water from his lungs. Max never left his side for more than a few short minutes. The base nurses loved the quiet, intensely protective dog. They brought him extra pieces of cooked chicken and fresh water every single day. Leo and Max spent hours just resting in the warm sunlight that came through the large glass window. The terrible nightmares that used to haunt both of them were finally gone. Leo did not dream about the dark, lonely streets anymore, and Max did not wake up whining about the dusty alley and the bomb. They had faced the ultimate terror in the dark, freezing river, and they had survived it together. The ghost of Sergeant Miller was no longer a heavy, painful weight in the room. It was a quiet, comforting memory. Max had finally realized that this new human would never abandon him, not even in the face of death. And Leo finally understood what it meant to have a real family that fought for him. He was no longer the angry, lonely orphan fighting the whole world by himself. He had a loyal, brave brother. When Dr. Vance finally told Leo he was clear to leave the hospital, Leo felt stronger than he had in many years. He put on his clean, dry clothes. He laced up his heavy boots carefully. Max stood by the door, holding his own leather leash in his mouth, completely ready to go home. It was a beautiful, cool, late afternoon. The air was crisp and completely still. Leo and Max walked slowly toward the wide green K9 training yard. Leo walked with a very slight limp, but his back was straight and strong. They did not go to the active obstacle course. They walked to the far edge of the quiet field, right near the old dead oak tree. The grass had grown back over the small hole they had dug months ago. Leo sat down heavily on the soft green grass. Max immediately sat right beside him, leaning his wide shoulder against Leo's arm. The sun was beginning to set in the distance. It painted the wide sky with brilliant shades of deep orange, soft pink, and bright gold. Leo reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out the silver metal chain. It held his own military dog tag. But next to it, hanging quietly on the exact same chain, was the rusty silver tag that read, Sergeant Miller, David. Leo looked at the 2 pieces of metal shining gently in the warm sunset light. He slowly lifted the chain and placed it around his neck. The cold metal rested against his chest, right over his beating heart. It felt completely right. He did not feel sad anymore. He felt a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude. Max rested his chin on Leo's knee and let out a long, incredibly peaceful sigh. Leo put his strong arm around the dog's thick neck and pulled him close. They sat there together in absolute silence, watching the sun go down over the horizon. It was the perfect end of a very long, dark night. It was no longer a story about terrible loss. It was the beautiful, quiet continuation of an unbreakable circle of love. If this story touched your heart today, please share this video with a friend or a family member who might need a gentle reminder of hope. I would also love to hear your personal stories. Leave a comment below and tell me about an animal or a kind person who helped you heal during a difficult time in your life. I read every single comment. Finally, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing these beautiful, inspirational journeys together. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next story.